Good morning. I have the great pleasure of introducing Bill Rapp to the Seminole Guard. Bill was born and raised in the Chicago area, graduating from Loyola University in Chicago in 1966. Near the end of 1967, he entered the Army with a track toward officer candidate school. Upon successful completion of this 26-week course, he continued his training in airborne jump school and Rotary Wing, which is the helicopter school. Volunteering for Special Forces training, he graduated in 1969 and began a two-tour period of service in Vietnam, initially as team leader of ODA 512. Near the end of the second year, he was selected to be the aide-de-camp of Major General Albert Malloy, the commanding general of the American Division of Chu Lai. While in Vietnam, Bill was awarded 3 Purple Hearts, 3 Bronze Stars, one of which was for valor, and 10 Air Combat Medals. He was also awarded a Presidential Unit Citation. Upon returning to the United States, he entered the Army Reserve and returned to work for ABC Television for the next 15 years, rising to the level of Midwest Manager of Telecommunications. A series of increasing responsibilities in the Army Reserves elevated him to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. In November 1986, Bill transferred to New York as the Director of Telecommunications for ABC Inc. At this time, he also retired from the Army. Bill's involvement with the Memorial Day Parade and celebration in Summit began in 1999 as a speaker and later as an assistant to the organizers. In 2005, he became the co-chair of the event. The event now attracts nearly 3,000 people. Bill joined the American Legion in 2002 and was elected commander in 2004 through 2013. He grew the post membership ranks by nearly 50% in that time. Bill was a 30-year resident of Summit with his wife, Jenny, who's joining us today. They now reside in Chatham Township. They've been married for 46 years, and he has 3 children, Corinna, Eileen, and Peter. His greatest passion now, aside from his family, is the well-being of all military personnel, both active and retired. And without further ado, I present Bill Rapp.
Gentlemen, it's my pleasure to join you here today. Glad to see all these smiling faces here. As one gentleman once told me, it's always great to smell the roses rather than look at the roots. I am Lieutenant Colonel William Rapp, although I prefer to be called Bill. It's been a long time since I've been called sir, and especially by those of you who are enlisted personnel in the military who say, I work for a living. I started out my military career right here in New Jersey at Fort Dix in basic training. I remember coming from Wheaton, Illinois, where I was living at the time, that long train ride, overnight train ride. You never took a trip to a military post when you started basic training in the daytime. No. It was always at nighttime, late at night. So it was an overnight, didn't get any sleep. Took a train ride and finally arrived, went through Pittsburgh, through Steeltown in the middle of the night, finally got in Fort Dix, 4 o'clock in the morning, no sleep, got into the basic training facilities and went and got your first set of fatigues that smelled like they'd been in mothballs for the last 30 years. And when you put them on, there were creases went in every direction, which told me that they had been in mothballs for 30 years. The basic training was everything that those of you who have been in the military knew it would be. Lots of push-ups. At the drop of a hat, the drill sergeant would say, drop down and give me 10. And you had to get down and give them 10. If you didn't give them 10, then he would say, drop down and give me another 10. It was physical conditioning. And many of us who had maybe been in sports in high school or in college had maybe a leg up, and we could do it, and it wasn't so bad. Well, those 8 weeks passed pretty quickly, and then it was on to AIT, or Advanced Infantry Training. Luckily for me, it was also at Fort Dix, so it was just moving from one side of the post to the other. In AIT, it was not quite as difficult because, as said, it was advanced infantry training. So we started getting more into tactical training. And I was given a leadership position there as a platoon guide, which was in essence like a platoon leader, something to give me an idea of what I would be facing as I was heading toward OCS later in life. I did find out that I was also responsible for my platoons passing inspections. Inspections were being responsible for that the bunks were all straight, and that the uniforms were all in good shape when we stood inspections, and especially the boots. And the boots, as those of you who are in the military, all had to be spit shined, which means that the TAC officers could see their faces in the toes of the boots. Now, I don't know whether any of you happen to notice my shoes when I came in. You can see your face in my shoes. These are not spit shined shoes. These are what are called Corfam, or your wives will know them more like patent leather. That's kind of cheating a little bit, but as you get older, it gets more and more difficult to spit shine. So they took pity on us officers, and they issued our dress shoes in what's called Corfam. But many a night was spent, and I mean night, and I mean all night, with the cotton balls and with the water, and if you put a little bit of denatured alcohol in with the water and the black shoe polish, and you rubbed, and you keep rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, it did something to the black shoe polish that made it shinier and shinier and shinier. But if you did it a little bit too long, all of a sudden it started getting duller and duller, and you had to stop and do it all over again. So it was a delicate balance. Well, pretty soon AIT finished, and then it was on to something else. Well, I had 3 days of leave, and then it was on to Fort Benning, Georgia, affectionately known by those of us who went down there as Benning School for Boys. The song that we all had to learn started out, far across the Chattahoochee to the Eupatoy stands our loyal alma mater, Benning School for Boys. It was 23 weeks that was designed to break you. The idea was to push you and push you and push you to your breaking point, to see what you could take, what you could stand, what your limits were, and then push you beyond that. PT was one of the ways they did that. Run and run and run. Physical exercise, the Army Physical Proficiency Test, which had a number of elements of it that were overhead. The monkey bars, you may know what those are, what they call the run, dodge, and jump, where you would run in between these obstacles and then dodge these pillars and then jump over a trough, get to the end, turn around and come back and do it all over again. They had a certain number score count, and then you added all of these up and then finished off with a mile run. And the closer you got to 100 on this total count, the better it was. Those people who fell below the minimum count were held back, or sometimes failed out of OCS altogether. Those that didn't went on to the next stage. There were 3 stages. There was basic, intermediate, and then senior candidates. At the end of 16 weeks, we moved on to senior candidate. That was special because then you got to wear a special kind of scarf and you switched from the plain old black helmet liners to a bright, light blue helmet liner that we wore that was very polished and very shiny and stood out, and you were a senior candidate and sometimes referred to as a third lieutenant. You were saluted by all the other OCS candidates, but you still had to salute any officer. But it made you feel special and kind of gave you an idea, what it was like to become an officer. One of the officers, the TAC officers that I had, was a gentleman by the name of Tucker Smallwood. Now, Tucker soon became one of my best friends after OCS. He was a bastard. He was on me like a horsefly on dung. He was pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. He said that if any one of his candidates could beat him in the Army Proficiency PCPT test, he would give a weekend pass. Everybody took him on. Nobody beat him. No one beat him. He was an excellent physical candidate. He was an African-American. He had no racial issues. He had no problems whatsoever. He found out later in the course that I had been in broadcasting. He wanted to get into show business in the worst way. So he took me aside, and while I was busy polishing my boots, he was asking me about broadcasting. So we established kind of a rapport. He attended graduation, of course, and he taught me more about drill and ceremony and discipline. And he taught me how to survive and taught me that I could do more than I thought I possibly could, physically and mentally. He would wake me up in the middle of the night in a tactical scenario and say, okay, your platoon leader just got killed. You're in charge. Here's the situation. Now I'm groggy with sleep. How do I respond? How do I take over the mission? And that, I know, in Vietnam saved my life on multiple occasions. So I owe my life to Tucker Smallwood. And I have told him that on many occasions. Years later, I happened to see a commercial for New York Telephone, and he was the star of that commercial. And I contacted New York Telephone and I said, I've got to get his information. So this is now almost 20 years later. I contacted him, and he and I have been in communication and have been best friends ever since. And my wife, Ginny, who is sitting with us here today, met up with him at a military convention, Military Order of World Wars convention out in California several years back, and had dinner with him. And when he got out of the car coming across the parking lot, it was just, I lost it. It was just absolutely wonderful. We had a wonderful evening that night. He got to meet Ginny, and Ginny got to meet him for the first time. And it was just very heartwarming. It was just wonderful. You might even have seen Tucker on the big screen. If any of you have seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, the one who played the mission control officer on the launches, that was Tucker. Or if you ever see the movie Cotton Club, he was the club manager. Graduation was really something on the parade ground. My mother came down to pin my bars on me because I was getting married the next weekend. And my wife was at the time, not Ginny, was at the time, was at home with all the preparations. So finished graduation, went home, got married, and then it was on my way, no leave, except to get married, a couple days of a brief honeymoon, and then back down to Fort Benning to jump school. Jump school, more running, run and run and run, build up those legs because that's the first thing that hits the ground. Tower week, very exciting tower week, 30-foot tower. Up you go, you climb to the top of the tower, you're in this rig and you jump off and it lets you down sort of slowly, but eventually you do hit the ground at about 8 miles an hour, but it still hurts if you don't have your hips and knees and ankles all together and you don't hit the right way. You are in a harness, and you do start out before you go into tower week by jumping off a small platform, and you practice hitting it and rolling it, and it's very exciting, and you're with a lot of other guys, and you go through training on how to pack your own chutes, and you go and you watch the riggers do it, and you do pack chutes so that you know what goes into it. And I have all the respect in the world for those riggers because you literally are putting your life in their hands. The ultimate end of that, of course, is jump week, and all these things are going through your heads of what to do, how to jump out, how to hold on to the rigs, how to control the chute, what to do when you hit the ground. And then you're up in the, we jumped out of a C-130, and as you're approaching the drop zone, and you're watching those lights up in the front, and it's all red, and all of a sudden the jump master says, "Everybody up," and you get up. And it's hook up, and you got your static line, and you hook it onto that wire up in front, and then everybody turns in unison and check out, and you're checking the guy in front of you, checking to make sure that all the straps are tight, and you yank them again, and they are all really tight already, but you do it again, safety first. And you all shuffle toward the front, shuffle to the door, and then stand in the door. The first guy's in the door. And then everybody is unconscious. You're not supposed to look at the lights. Everybody has got their eyes turned to the side, and you're all looking at the light because you're just waiting for that thing all of a sudden to go green. All of a sudden, go, green light, go! And that jump master, he turns and goes, whack, and he hits that first guy. That first guy goes out, and everybody goes right after him. Bing, 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 out the door. And that slipstream hits you. And that wind is coming at about 130 miles an hour at you. And you hit that, and you go out, and that blasted air. It's like, if any of you have gotten hit by the air coming out of one of those air blowers, those leaf blowers or something like that, it's something like that, but times 10. And that hits you, and it is cold. Because you're at about, you're about 8,000 feet when you come out of that, and come out and you go and you're hanging and you're jumped and you're kind of like in a V position. All of a sudden, boom, you get jerked straight up. Now that harness is coming down and it surrounds you and it's down in between your legs. And you better have had a nice tight strap hitched on that. Because if not, you are in a world of hurt. Luckily, I had a nice tight strap, but because you're going to definitely have some chafe down there. So you're down there, and all of a sudden, it is just so peaceful. It is so peaceful, and you're drifting down, and you have some control. Now they have different kind of chutes now. They have these like paracommander chutes now. But we had those just like World War II kind of circular ones when I went through jump school. And finally come down, and then all of a sudden it starts coming up, and you start thinking about, okay, I got to get the hips, knees, ankles all together, feet together, ready for your landing. Came down, and you hit, and you land, and you roll. And then immediately you got to start going up and grabbing your canopy lines and pulling them down in there to collapse the chute. Otherwise, you're going to be dragged across the field to Kingdom Come. Get it down and collapse, and then you got to start wrapping it all up and carrying it up and going over to where your the rest of your team was. So that was great. And then you got to realize, I got to go over to the truck, and we're going to go up and do it again. So we go up there, and that's the thing. The first jump was a piece of cake. The second jump is the scariest thing I have ever done. Because all of a sudden it's, oh my God, I just jumped out of an airplane at 8,000 feet and there's nothing underneath me. Up we went again, this time with a different chute. Obviously, we went and changed them because we didn't pack our own chutes and did it. So did 2 jumps that day. And then went back and we had a critique and everybody in my class passed. So we had graduation and then I was very proudly got my wings, my jump wings right here. Now, those who go on to specialized jumping can get a jump wings with a star that becomes a master parachutist. And those are ones who do specialized free fall jumping, and like the Black Knights are all master parachutists. Those are the special demonstration jumpers for West Point. And then the instructors are all master parachutists, and those are the guys who've got hundreds and hundreds of jumps. My 5 stateside jumps were just fine in the 7 I did over in Vietnam, including a halo jump, which is probably one of the scariest ones I've ever done. A halo is a high altitude, low opening, and then the night jump that we did over in combat was also kind of scary, but I'll get to that one later. After jump school, my next orders were to go to flight school. Now, I had gotten my private pilot license in civilian life through the Boy Scouts. We had an air squadron, which was an Explorer Scout extension of the Boy Scouts. Learned to fly in a Piper PA-12. And so I had that under my belt. And well, they saw that in my application for OCS. And so they said, oh, you're a good candidate to go to flight school. So I learned to fly a UH-1H. Ground school was, I had a lot of familiarity with the ground school terminology and that, so that wasn't so bad. But the first time I got into the cockpit of a Huey, which looks like a flying tadpole, and getting oriented to, instead of having a stick and a steering wheel, is to have a stick in front of me and a collective on the left side. And I said, okay, revving up the engine on that, and we pull up and we go up. And so I pulled up and I got up and he says, okay, now just hover. So I said, what? Hover? Okay. So I pulled it up. And so I pulled it up and he says, now don't overcorrect. All right. So I pulled it up and the helicopter started going like this. Like this. He said, don't overcorrect. I said, I'm not. I'm barely moving. Well, hydraulics are a funny thing. Hydraulics, you do a little bit and it's real easy to overcorrect. Little did I know that the hydraulics on a UH-1H helicopter are relatively simple compared to some of the other helicopters that they have today. And this was like going from one of the old cars like the Model T, which you had to use a lot of force. Some of the old cars we used to drive, to the modern days with power steering. That's kind of like what it was, not what I was used to. The fixed wing planes that you literally, like the PA-12, which to land you literally had to put on the ground. With the helicopters, they just kind of settle down real easy. So at the end of flight school and after my first solo, I was feeling pretty confident and I was feeling pretty good. Well, at the end of that, I was ready to get on to the more serious things in life. So I'm down there on post with my new bride, but I knew the next stage was to special forces training, and I knew there was no on-post housing, so I had to send my bride home to live with her parents. So I did that, and then was on to Fort Bragg. Now, I thought that I was in pretty good shape and I'm feeling pretty confident, but I was not prepared for Q school. Q school is the first week of Special Forces training, and that is about as brutal as you can get. You've probably heard of Bud's Week in Navy and SEALs training. It's something like this, where it is sleep deprivation, it is physical exertion, it is everything that you can imagine to get you in the absolute tip-top shape. We did training in the jungles down at Eglin Air Force Base, in Bragg, in the woods, orienteering, tactics, teamwork. We paired off in teams. They started organizing. We started having guys who just found out that they were not meant for this. We lost probably 35% of our class when we graduated with, I think, 110 out of 190 that started out in our class. But we were all very proud at the end of that class. We at the end of the class, we finally established our various detachments. We were all at the end of Special Forces, because we were all airborne qualified. They assigned us to the various airborne brigades. Some were 101st Screening Able, some were 82nd. I was assigned to 82nd Airborne. That was just a temporary posting, but then they subdivided us down into the various detachments, Alpha detachments, Operation Detachment Alpha. I was ODA 512. I had 13 men, and those are the 13 men that I took over to Vietnam. And I'm proud to say that I took 13 men over to Vietnam, and I brought those 13 men back, all 13 of them. I will say that all 13 of them had at least one Purple Heart. I have 3, and then 2 of the other guys also had 3. But none of the guys wanted to be medevac back. They all were treated on their wounds, and they said, I'm not going, I'm staying with my guys. I was, my first one, I received shrapnel in my knee that I carried that piece of shrapnel in for 37 years because the doctor at the MASH hospital that I was briefly at while he patched me up, he said, knee surgery in early 1970 is not what it is today. And he said, we may do more harm than good. So he said, it's not in a dangerous area. It probably will get encapsulated. And as long as it's not causing movement and not locking up, let's leave it as is. We'll bandage it up, treat it for infections, and live with it. So I did. 12 years ago, I had knee replacement surgery. So when they did the knee replacement, when the doctor was doing the x-ray, he sees this white spot in the x-ray. What the hell is that? And I said, oh, I didn't tell you about that? That's a piece of shrapnel that I got in Vietnam. He says, what do you want to do about it? And I said, can I keep it? And I was going to keep it, but it was the grossest looking thing. It just looked like something that come out of my nose. and no, yes. So, but I'm glad I didn't, because if it had shifted or anything, it could have done some real damage. But anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. When I first got to Vietnam, I was stationed in the Trang, that's in Tu Corps, and I was under the command of the famous Colonel Charlie Beckwith. Charlie Beckwith is a legend in Special Forces, and he was the founder of the Delta Force. And he, one of his heroes was General George Patton. And he subscribed to the theory of, may God have mercy on my enemies, because I don't. And that's the way we fought. And in 2 Corps was the concentration of most of the special forces over there. We went out and we were harassing and interdicting, but at the same time, we were trying to win the hearts and minds of the people and the Vietnamese people who were the villagers. We were trying to let them know that we were not the bad guys. We were the ones who were there to help them in their daily lives because we had skills amongst our various people in engineering and health sciences. I personally delivered a number of babies along with my medic that they would normally have just walked out on the rice paddy and squatted and delivered their babies. So we were able to help them in that. And many times they repaid us by keeping their eyes and ears open for movement of the VC and would let us know, oh yeah, they came through the village, or they're hiding over there, or that guy is a Viet Cong. Don't let him give you any baloney. He's a Viet Cong, and we would capture them and we get information, or they just came and they're coming tonight, or they'll be in that village tomorrow or something like that. So they were very valuable assets. Well, after about 3 months, Colonel Beckwith decided that it would be a better use of military personnel if we spread out the various ODAs throughout all of Vietnam. So my detachment was assigned up to I Corps to the Americal Division. And we went up and we were attached as a reconnaissance platoon of the 4th of the 31st of the 196th Battalion, 196th Brigade of the Americal Division in I Corps, located on LZ West, which is about 75 miles southwest of Da Nang, very close to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, near the western edge of I Corps. Now, Vietnam was divided into 4 sections: 1, 2, 3, and 4 Corps, and they put Roman numerals in. Roman numeral 1 looks like an I, so they call it I Corps. So when we got up there, my commander, who was at that time Lieutenant Colonel Sam Wetzel, he asked me to analyze the reconnaissance platoon that he had up there, which unfortunately turned out to be the cast-offs of the various line companies, the ones who kind of messed up and got sent back to the hill so they wouldn't destroy the various line companies. So he said, take them out on just a brief little reconnaissance around the base of the hill and let me know what you think. So I took them out for 2 days and I came back and I went in and he said, how'd they do? And I said, sir, please don't ever do that to me again. And I said, one of the guys lost the secure password book to the secure radio, and luckily my platoon sergeant found it lying on the ground. Another guy, you might as well put an ad in the New York Times because he had no noise suppression. He walked around and you could hear his canteen and mess kit and that go clank, 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 and very disrespectful. And they were all short timers and they didn't care, and they're going to get somebody killed. So what do you want me to do with them? I said, keep them up here on the hill. They can work on the burn pits, have them on perimeter security or something like that. Let us do our job, what we're trained to do. That's what Special Forces does. So I said, what do you want us to do? He says, okay. He said, are you familiar with the Ah Shaw Valley? If any of you know about the Vietnam, we were there. We got there at the beginning of 1969. So the Ah Shaw Valley was very prominent in the Tet Offensive. And in Marble Mountain was prominent in the Ah Shaw Valley, and they had potholes and hiding places for the Viet Cong that they would hide in and pop out and snipe at. all Americans as they move down the Oshawa Valley. He said, I said, yes, sir, I'm very familiar. We studied that intensively. He says, good. I'm going to drop you off at the beginning of Oshawa Valley. You're going to go down here to the end of Oshawa Valley, and I want you to clean it out. Yes, sir, whatever you want. So that's what we did. We went and we started at one end, and a year later, we got to the end, and we had done substantial damage to them, not only in cleaning it out, but ambushes, interdictions, hearts and minds of the people who told us a lot of times where the VC were and where they weren't, so we didn't waste any time. But we used up a lot of ordnance, a lot of jets from Da Nang. Thank God for those Marine jets. They are excellent. Do we have any Marines here? Well, thank God for the Marine pilots, because they are really good, especially in dropping napalm. Boy, they're dead on. And if you've ever, you see those pictures of napalm, that is devastating. Poor guys are in the Viet Cong. They almost feel sorry for them, because when the napalm hits, there's nothing but what we used to call crispy critters. They're exceptionally good, exceptionally good. While we were out there, one of the functions of our recon platoon was a ready reaction. As I said, Colonel Beckwith was also the founder of the Delta Force. Delta Force is also a ready reaction force that can go at an instant moment someplace as an instant reinforcement. We got a call that there was a platoon of the 2nd of the 1st that was in trouble, that had been overrun and ambushed, and some had been taken prisoner, and the Viet Cong was trying to make an escape over to the Ho Chi Minh Trail with prisoners. And were we available to support? And I said, absolutely. Now we had a Chinook that was at our beck and call. So I called back to headquarters on secure to Colonel Wetzel, and thinking back to our graduation from OCS, I knew that some of the guys from OCS were going directly over to Vietnam, weren't going on the special training. And my bunkmate was a gentleman by the name of Dale Rising. And he had gotten his assignment to the 2nd of the 1st. And I called back and I said, excuse me, sir, I was told we're going to rescue a platoon the 2nd of the 1st. Would that by any chance of the commander of that be Dale Rising? And he said, why, yes. How did you know that? I said, he was my bunkmate in OCS. Request immediate dust off with the CH, and we'll be on our way. So they came, the Chinook came out, took the entire platoon. I went and took it. And I said, requesting immediate cover support and artillery support at our location. I had the maps. I knew where we were going to land. We landed and we were able to spot them. They were down below and they were crossing over on a rice paddy. Requested support of two Cobra helicopters equipped with loudspeakers and Vietnamese speakers on board. And I had them circling and we had them broadcasting, telling them to surrender. They stopped in tracks. We could see them through my binoculars. They weren't moving. They stopped, and then they started moving again. I had the Cobras fire Willie Pete's or white phosphorus rockets in front of them to stop them. They stopped again. Then they didn't. Then they started moving again. Then I had them fire HE rockets in front, and that stopped them for a second. Then they started moving again. Then I had them do a pass around them, literally do a round of 122 millimeter rockets around them to stop them. And they stopped, and I kept calling on the rocket, you know, Chu Hoi, stop, surrender. And they wouldn't do it. In the meantime, I sent I sent 5 of the guys down the hill as fast as they could going. Now they're going down a hill like this, and it's heavy brush. And I was really worried that they weren't going to get down there in time. And then through the binoculars, I saw this tall Viet Cong guy pulls out his machete, got Dale on the ground, and beheaded him right in front of my eyes. And I lost it. Then they went and they executed the other 3 men in his platoon. And then the Viet Cong just took out like bats out of hell for the ridge line. I let him get about 50 yards beyond. And then I told the Cobras, headed for the ridge line, fire for effect. And I told them what happened. The Cobras rolled in and they emptied 14 rockets on the Viet Cong and just wiped them out. Then the rest of the platoon, we went down, called a Chinook in, we retrieved Dale's body and took him back to headquarters. I called back to Colonel Wetzel and I told him that we had failed in our mission to rescue Dale, but I requested a mercy flight and I requested being able to return his body back to his parents because I had become very close to his parents in OCS. And was granted that, and I escorted his body back to Roanoke, Virginia, and attended his ceremony, and his parents were very grateful. And after the ceremony, I had to take the next flight back to my unit back. So, but I was a mess on the way over and on the way back. But war is hell, gentlemen. It becomes very personal. I got a memorial stone that I placed on the Walk of Honor at the Fort Benning Infantry Museum. It's there, and I was there for a reunion, and I went and I saw and I paid homage to that stone of Dale. And every anniversary of his death, I say a prayer, and every Veterans Day I say a prayer for Dale because he was something really special. Sorry for that downer, but every Veterans Day, it means a lot. And anybody who's been in combat, who has lost someone very special, it is something special. On a little bit lighter note, I have one other story I want to share with you. We were ambushed by some VC at one point. Coming out of a village that was suspected of storing ammunition in their huts, and it was abandoned. And we're on our way out, and we're caught on this rice paddy dike out in the open, and we were receiving fire from behind these like big 5-ton boulders that was about 500 meters away. And we're firing, and of course our small arms fire just bouncing off of these rocks. So we jumped onto the opposite side of this rice paddy dike into the rice paddy. And so we're in about 1.5 feet of water and 2 feet of mud. And the rounds are coming in one side of the rice paddy dike, and we're in the other side of the rice paddy dike. It was raining like cats and dogs, and it was foggy in that. And all the jets were grounded in Da Nang. It being on the opposite side of the Nui Cham Ridge, and the ridge is like this. So artillery couldn't fire up and down like this. It was too dangerous because I couldn't adjust fire, because when it's such a high arcing angle, the slightest variation could be off by 100 yards. So I'm asking, it's starting to get dark. And once it got dark, we would have gotten overrun. I estimated there were probably about 15, 20 people hiding in those rocks. I'm asking for anything, any help at all. I get a call finally from RS2. He says, okay, I've got some firepower coming in. I said, good, I'll take it, whatever it is. He said, get your heads down. To get your heads down. He says, rounds on the way. Okay, I'm waiting 10, 15 seconds, nothing's happening. I call back, I said, verify rounds on the way. Yes, get your heads down. Get the heads down. Another 10, 15 seconds going. Confirm. Damn it, Captain, get your heads down. I get my heads down. All of a sudden, zoom, 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 zoom. Those rocks lit up like a 4th of July finale. And we literally bounced out of the water and settled back down. And I said, what the hell was that? And he said, that was one 16-inch round from the USS New Jersey, 32 miles away in the South China Sea. Thank you, US Navy. And I said, that's wonderful. That was a direct hit. And he then comes back with something that I said, the fire control officer would like to fire for effect. And I said, fire for effect, there's nothing left to fire on. And he said, oh, come on, Captain, the guys don't get a chance to fire. I said, fine, go right ahead. So I said, guys, cover up. So they did. 5 more rounds came in. Then the S2, God love him, says, could we have a battle damage assessment? And I said, yeah, I've got one huge pile of red gravel. So then we were able to get out, and he said, you didn't bring anything back. And I handed him a handful of red gravel. There you go. Make of it as you will. After the end of that second tour, I transitioned to near the end of it. I transitioned to Cobra gunships. Because I had my helicopter training, and we did worked out of Chulai into hunter-killer teams. The hunter-killer team are 2 Cobras and a small little observation helicopter whose job was to fly at treetop level, sort of like a irritating mosquito, and trying to draw fire. And then he would draw fire, and then he'd spin off. And we 2 Cobras would be sitting up at about 2,000 feet, because when he's spinning around, he'd be sitting with a smoke grenade and an open window. It's buzzing around and trying to draw fire, and somebody'd shoot at him, and he'd drop a smoke grenade right on top of him, and he'd peel off, and we'd peel down, and we'd fire rockets on him. And we would also, he would work as a forward air controller if there were troops in trouble or engaged, and that he could call in fast movers or F4 Phantoms, or our team of killer Cobras. We can go in with rockets or 122. We could go in with grenades or machine guns, miniguns, whatever the mission called for. So I did that for about 6 months. And then my friend, now Colonel Wetzel, full Colonel Wetzel, recruited me out of the field to be the aide-de-camp to Major General Albert Malloy, who was the commanding general of the Marical Division in Chulai. And since I was a certified helicopter pilot, he also made me his command pilot. So I moved into the aides quarters on the general staff compound. Now I thought I died and gone to heaven, because all of a sudden here was a bunk with sheets and an air-conditioned hooch in Vietnam. And I got to eat at the general's headquarters, actual food, hot meals, 3 times a day. Couldn't believe I'm still in the country. Yep, still in country. But the downside is that the general's helicopter was parked in the landing pad right outside the general's quarters, so that we got word that he had to go. I had to get out of my bunk over to the chopper. The crew's quarters was right outside there. Get it revved up. He'd be on there, and we are on our way in about 10 minutes. And he liked to overfly hot LZs. Of course, our chief of staff, who was a full bird colonel, and he was on the list for general, he always made sure that he said, no, don't take any chances. He didn't want to mess up his chance to make general. Don't take any chances with a boss. He says, So he insisted that we overfly to hot LZ at 10,000 feet. You know how cold it is at 10,000 feet with an open air door and on a Huey? It's cold. So, and he gave me this card that was like about this big, and it was painted baby blue and a hole punched in the middle of it. And he said, before you go out, you take that card and you hold that up to the sky. If that hole is in the same color as that card, don't take the general out. I said, excuse me? He says, you want me to tell the general that we can't go flying unless this card matches the sky? I said, excuse me, sir, would you tell the general that? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I finished my my tour in Vietnam, and I headed back to the States, fully expecting, well, not really sure what to expect when I got back. I had heard stories that citizens of the United States were not really happy with us soldiers coming back, and I learned that firsthand because I landed and I transitioned through Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Now, if any of you are familiar with Seattle-Tacoma Airport, it is the military terminal is on one side and the civilian terminal is on this side. And I wound there and I had half an hour to get to the civilian to get my flight back to Chicago. And so I'm hustling in uniform and I get halfway there and I run into these three people that look like Peter, Paul, and Mary on steroids. And they looked like they hadn't taken a bath in a month. And out of the corner of my eye, I see something coming toward me. And it was a water balloon filled with pig's blood. And they started yelling, baby killer, murderer. And I almost lost it if it wasn't for two of the biggest MPs I've ever seen in my life that looked like they had their uniforms painted on them. They had arm muscles like this. And they stopped them and they said, are we having a problem, sir? And I said, no, I'm gonna miss my plane if I don't get going. Don't worry, sir, we'll take care of them. And he goes and he picks them both up, the guys up like this, and starts going, he's the murderer. And he said, you guys are still lucky to be standing. You see the patch on his sleeve. They don't call him a snake eater for nothing. And he takes them off and the other guy says, hop on my Jeep, sir. We'll get you there in no time. He gets in and they had one of those posts in the back with a little light that goes like this, you know. He took off and we took off. We got in the stand and the gal said, oh, just close the door of the gate. And this other guy who was huge got up and says, ma'am, he just got back from Vietnam. Could you please open the door of the plane? She says, yeah, I think we can do that. And she goes and she calls ahead and says, yeah, the captain's opening the gate. I got in, I headed in, got into the plane. I headed right because my thing said it's like 26D or something, headed to right and flight to, oh, no, wait a minute, sir, you're going the wrong way. Turned in. They bumped me up to first class, which was really nice. I thank American Airlines for that. So it was nice getting back and finally able to relax. I came back and my first posting was Fort Leonard Wood, where they gave me a dual role as the chief of the educational television division, where I made training tapes. And they also gave me a dual role as training aggressor squads. These are the ones who we played the enemy for all of the officers who were coming in from ROTC and the military academies. They had to train training to be brand new second lieutenants. So when they said, well, what did I need to be able to train them to be aggressor squads? So I said, well, one of the equipments is I went and bought them all ghillie suits. Now, any of you guys are hunters, you know what a ghillie suit is? That's the one that makes you look like a huge piece of moss. And bought that. And so I delighted in teasing all of the training NCOs by ambushing them left and right, not following them in the military book of tactics, and doing exactly what the VC did to us over in Vietnam. And when the sergeant major would say, I'm following the book of tactics says we do this and this is how we train them. And I said, you know what, Sergeant Major, the VC can't read English. So don't give me that. I'm trying to keep these guys alive. And if they can beat me and my crew, they will survive Vietnam. So after I left Fort Leonard Wood, my wife at the time started saying, well, I don't want to be a military wife. So I made the decision to go into the reserves. So I went into the reserves, and so I was able to stay in the military. And we went back to Chicago, and I went back to ABC, and we started a family. And 6 months later, she filed for divorce. So now I'm stuck. But luckily, that's when I found my new love. And she sits right there. And that was 46 years ago. In 1986, relocated to New York. That's when I re-engaged with my military buddies, American Legion and VFW. I re-engaged with now Lieutenant General Sam Wetzel in the Military Order of the World Wars, which has become my new passion, and now the New Jersey commander. I now am determined that nobody who is coming back from the military now goes through what I had to go through. And I'm just going to finish off and leave you with a couple of things, a couple of observations. The crisis in leadership that we have in the military right now is at the highest level in all branches. The wokeness has invaded everything in the military. It's not the same as when I was in. It's almost disgusting. Standards have been lowered to fit the job. You had a bar that we had in special forces, or even in basic training in the basic military. And then you have candidates who are here. So rather than have them meet the bar, they've taken and lowered the bar. The bar should be that we don't leave anybody behind. I didn't leave any of my men behind. I brought them all back. And that's the way it should always be. If you have one of your compatriots out there and he is wounded and he's a 200-pound guy, and you have a 150-pound guy who got into special forces, that 150-pound guy, he's going to be able to carry that wounded 200-pound guy on his shoulder 100 yards out? I don't think so. I don't, they say, well, you should be able to allow women on the battlefield. Maybe that woman is a brilliant in cyber warfare. It doesn't take a 200-pound guy to do cyber warfare. If the cyber warfare has certain standards that they need, they don't need a big Hulk guy, a stud, to do that. Charlie Beckwith once said, I'd rather go down the river with 7 studs than 100 dipshits, which is true. So if you've got standards for a particular job, let's keep the standards, but let's not lower the standards to fit the jobs. It is a fact that recruitment is down in every single branch. It's worse in the Army. And here's a fact that I found out the other day that I almost couldn't believe. And it's frightening. 80% of eligible personnel between 18 and 25 are unfit to serve because of physical fitness, mental acuity, prior drug use, or past criminal history. Now let that sink in. 80% of the young people who are eligible to serve between 18 and 25 because of physical fitness, mental acuity, prior drug use, or past criminal history. Just think about that. And here's another one that I am very proud of. 92% of all those who served in Vietnam received an honorable discharge from the service. So not everybody who they claimed was a murderer and a baby killer. Thank you, gentlemen. It was an honor to be here. Sure. I'm sorry if I ran long.
Thank you so much, Colonel Bill, for a very personal perspective. And all we can say is, as we often do, thank you for your service. We have time for a few questions.
This is a history question, and with your aviation experience, maybe you have some idea. Do you have any idea who the first person who figured out how to pack a parachute figured that out?
Oh, boy. I don't know, but I would love to shake his hand. I don't know how to pack a parachute. I think the parachute was invented by Michelangelo. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, online, Roger Burns.
Unmute. Colonel, thank you very much. It was one of the better talks I've heard in quite a while. I'd like to know what's your feeling on the draft?
Oh, I'm all for it. If not the draft, some sort of federal service. I'm all for restoring some sort of federal service, whether it's in the military or some sort of federal service. I am 100% for that. I think we owe it. I think the young people owe it to the country.
I totally agree with you on that. Just one point, since no one else got their hand up right now. One thing I remember in basic was our sergeant telling us, as long as you're alive, you can take one more step. And I tell my wife that every time she tells me I shouldn't be cleaning the gutters or climbing ladders, but it stuck with me.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Yes, and thank you for your service. And as I'm sure, like you, it was an honor and a privilege. And if I was younger, I'd do it all over again.
Agreed.
Okay. Online, John Tomaszewski.
Yes, again, thank you for your service. Every time I go to Washington, I have to see the Vietnam Memorial. It really is something. What are your thoughts on it?
On the wall?
Yeah.
Every time the one time that I have been to the wall, and I'm remiss on not getting there more often. The one time I've been to the wall and I found Dale's name on the wall, I lost it completely. And if it weren't for my good wife and my son there who made an etching for me, I don't think I wasn't able to stand. And there were two other veterans there who were able to stabilize me. It's exceptionally moving. And anybody who has not been there and gets to Washington, D.C., please visit the wall. If you know of anybody who died and was over there, there's a kiosk there. You can go and you can find the person's name and can go right there. It is exceptionally moving. And there's a Vietnam memorial there, the soldiers, and stop by and see all of the memorials, the Korean War and the World War II. Please do.
Yeah. Yeah, it just shows you war in a personal state with so many names. Otherwise, you don't really get that effect anywhere else.
No, you hear the number, the 58,000 plus names, and it numbers get lost. You hear the government talk about $31 trillion in debt, and the numbers get lost. But you go there and you see this huge black slab, and then you see the numbers, and it hits you like a ton of bricks. It really does.
Second, just for one moment.
Sure.
In just a second, we'll ask Terry to come up to give our formal thank you to Colonel Bill, but I can't resist this. When Terry introduced you, he said that you were a 1966 graduate of Loyola Chicago.
Yes, I am.
And therefore, I would have to think that when you were a freshman, you were ecstatic when Loyola beat Cincinnati for the 1966 basketball championship.
Yes,
Chicago must have been a great place to be.
it was. Dick Ross tipped that one in. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And Terry, please.
Well, we all want to thank you for a very moving talk. In the tradition of the Summit Old Guard, we present you with this certificate of appreciation. It has the orchid on it, which really harkens back to the 1930 when the Summit Old Guard started. Summit was a center of orchids on the East Coast. And what it really reminds us of the purpose of the Summit Old Guard, which is fellowship and fellowship and friendship and community. So I present this to you. But I'd like to also give you a non-military salute, what we call the Summit Old Guard salute. Very moving.
Thank you all. It was my pleasure and honor to be here.